Welcome to the Draknek and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Draknek and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Draknek at Draknek and Friends.
Hey.
Today, we're joined by Dana Trebella, who you may know from her work on various titles through her agency Spoken Wheel. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Doing well. So, for people who don't know you, how do you tend to introduce yourself and kind of describe to people what Spoken Wheel does?
Okay, cool. So I'm Dana. I'm the founder of Spoken Wheel Strategy. I do marketing, PR, brand strategy, some biz dev stuff for indies. Have been doing it for the last 10 years. And I work on all different games, all different sizes, all different types of teams, all different platforms. And it's been fun.
Yeah, we worked with you for a couple of years there. You were super great to work with.
Thank you. You guys were too.
Well, thank you. And while we were working with you, not to talk too much about people who aren't here, you were also helping other people that we knew on Thinky Games. And so I would love to start and kind of dig in with when it comes to marketing and positioning games of this sort, games where a lot of the gameplay is happening in your head. What are some of the challenges that you've seen with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges in the thinky game genre or puzzle games or anything of that ilk. I think a few things. One, they can be really hard to show visually. So, like in screenshots, especially, I think it's really hard to communicate. So I think when sort of figuring out how to market a thinky game, kind of keeping in mind like how to visually show it, both in trailer form and screenshot GIF form is hard, but also really important. And then I think too, like there's a really loyal niche audience in the thinky game space, but I also think there's potential to reach way more people. But a lot of people are very afraid of that genre, or just think like, oh, I don't like puzzles, I won't like this, or I'm bad at puzzles, I won't like this. So I think trying to figure out, and that obviously is true for certain titles that are like very hard or very puzzly or whatever, but I think there's a lot of thinky games that fall in this sort of gray space that could reach people who love cozy games, or who love narrative games, or who love like games with certain visual styles or whatever. So I think figuring out like that audience and how to kind of segment and define them and what might resonate for people who are a little bit afraid of it is really important. Trying to think what else. And I think, as always, when you're developing like any sort of game, sort of thinking about like the hook or the differentiator or how to position in general is really important. Ideally, before you've finished the game, right? So you don't want to just finish the game and then be like, now I have to figure out my hook. I think ideally doing that in tandem with marketing is always ideal.
Yeah, I feel like something we've said, like talked about on this podcast before, is like the idea that for a lot of games, a lot of puzzle games or thinky games, the most effective marketing they've had is kind of tricking people into playing it, or like framing it not as a puzzle game, but as something else first. And then like, oh, but if you get into it, you'll realize it's a puzzle game, but we're not going to promote that side of it.
Yeah, totally. But I think that's hard too, right? Because like, I think people want to lead with genre so often. So I think it's like, well, then what do you say about the game? Or what goes in the Steam capsule? Or what festival do I put the game in? But I totally agree with you. I think the most powerful tool for any sort of thinky game is people getting their hands on it.
Yeah, one conversation that we had when we were working with you that was funny because it just kept happening over and over again was, so what sets your game apart from all of the other puzzle games?
Yeah.
And then being like, I don't know, it's really good. And then you being like, we can't put that on the Steam page and have people believe it.
Totally.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, what puts your game apart from other puzzle games is like you can find something to say, but the thing that you're saying is not exciting.
Totally. I think we ran into
Yes.
that a lot, right? With like Sokoban Express, especially.
Yeah, is like we can, and we had this conversation internally and with you, which was like we can talk about the thoughtfully designed mechanics. We can talk about intricate game design that is balancing what the player is keeping in their head at any given moment versus the actions they need to take on screen and that push pull. And at the end of it, we're like, so chemistry?
Yeah, I think that is what we ended up leaning on a
Yeah.
lot. But I think you're totally right. I think it's so hard, right? So I think like if we could go back in time, like an ideal way to do it, like you're not alone, first of all, in that. I think there's tons of people in the thinky game space, and honestly in games in general, who struggle with that or make the game they want to make and then get to the end and are like, uh-oh, well, what do I say about it? But I think like if we could go back in time, ideally we would have baked something into the development of the game to like help further differentiate that. But often that's not possible. So I think like in that case, a lot of what we did, right? Like trying to make trailers that was compelling or trying to figure out like how to message the trailer in a way that was different or trying to get the game in front of the right people. I think in some cases that's kind of like the best that you can do.
Yeah. How soon, in your opinion, in a project is too soon to think about positioning? Because like a lot of teams will obviously begin prototyping, thinking about the mechanic or the experience they want the player to have. But like, is there a moment that is like that's too soon? This is like exactly the right time to begin. I mean, obviously the first answer is going to be it's different for every game, but in general.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot and I never know how to answer it, but I think that even like before a game is ever publicly announced, first of all, ideally there would be some marketing bend to it, like a marketing person's involvement in some level, because that's always when you hold the most power, right? Is before you say anything. But I think as long as you have like a pretty fully formed idea that you're pretty confident is the game you're going to make, I think you can generally start within reason, right? If it's a game that's going to take you 7 years to make, then you might want to wait. But assuming we're working with like more typical timelines of like a couple years, I think at that point, like you could look at competitors. I think you could look at market landscape. I think you could look at what's currently trending in the games industry. And I also think that part of positioning, which like no one can really do, but people try to do, is like predict the future of what's going to work well or what's going to be popular. But I think that in most cases, people start too late. Like it's happened to me once or twice where I've started with someone and been like, this is too soon. You don't know what the game is. I can't help you if we have no clear idea of what this even is. But that's like so rare. I mean, most of the time people are like, I'm launching in a month. What can you do? So I would say like earlier than you think is generally my answer to that.
Yeah, do you have examples of the kinds of things you'd be suggesting that people be thinking about early on pre-release, or like types of questions that people should be asking themselves?
Yeah, totally. Like pre-release or pre even
Sorry, I meant
announcing?
pre-announce.
Okay, cool. I would say one, like if you're trying to capitalize on a trend, right? Like I don't know, when Slay the Spire came out, everyone was making a card game. For the most part, at that point, you're too late. So I think just keeping that in mind. That's not really a question, but just keeping that in mind. But I think in general, you want to ask yourself like, um, what is really different about this game than other games in the genre, other games that have come out. And I think also things like it's really nostalgic, or I don't know, like it's 3D, like those types of things that's not going to cut it. You've got to have like a really strong answer there. But I think looking at like market analysis, so like looking as best if you can at like other games in a similar genre or in a similar place as you, both successes and failures, I think you can honestly learn just as much from games that tried and failed or fell short, and kind of try your best to make general opinions and assessments about like what did they do and why did this happen. And when you're looking at other games, looking at like what did media say about them, if anything? What did streamers like kind of latch onto? What do the Steam store reviews say? Like all of that kind of stuff I think is relevant. And then I think also looking at like a SWOT analysis, right? So that's where you talk about like your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And I think that's important in terms of getting like a holistic picture of like not only the game, but what can you do with your team, with the resources that you have. So like what are the strengths of the game, but also what are the strengths of the team, and how can you kind of leverage that? Or what's like a threat that could happen, maybe in your control or out of your control. Something like, I don't know, a new platform launch that you might not be part of, or I don't know, things like that. And how can you kind of mitigate that? I think both of those are really important. And then typically also just thinking through like some kind of general timeline before you announce, I think is helpful in terms of figuring out like when should you announce, what should you show, how are you going to do it? Are you going to try and be in a showcase? Are you going to try to work with a platform? Are you going to try and do it alone? Like, do you have a strong enough community to do that? All of those sorts of things. So kind of just looking at like the whole picture, I think before you announce is really ideal.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And how do you feel about when a developer like Draknek and Friends comes to you and says, so we announced our game a year and a half ago?
I mean, that's just to make you feel better. That happens all the time. You are not alone.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. No, we look, you know us. We do a lot, we say a lot, we make a lot, we publish a lot, and we are a lot to work with sometimes.
But I think I was going to say too, one thing to note though is like you guys are launching, because you're launching a lot of different titles, right? You don't have like all of your resources pooled into one game. But yes. I think for a lot of teams, when like this is their game and they've got like, you know, $2 million of funding from XYZ, like there's just like really high pressure there. And not to say that you guys yes. don't have pressure, but I think that like also helps mitigate some of the risk, the fact that you do put out a lot.
100%.
Yeah. What do you think, if somebody has announced their game a year and a half ago, what do you think is the biggest, most impactful thing they can do if they've been struggling to market their game or get attention for their game?
Yeah.
Other than ship it and make a new one.
Totally. I think there's a few things. One, I think you can play around with Steam tags and kind of see like what's working and what's not working there. And that can just be something like pretty easy to do. I think two, I did a talk at GDC this past year about like showcases, and Mari actually gave an interview for that, so thanks. But one of the things that actually we heard like consistently was that a lot of these organizers like to feature underrepresented games, or games that are announced but people don't really know about them yet. So I think you still have a pretty good chance at getting into a showcase if you've already announced and you're not getting a lot of traction. But I also think that it's valid to like look at why you're not getting a lot of traction. So like there's only like so much you can actually know, because you can't like hear from the general collective. But I think looking at like, okay, are we not engaging enough with our community? Are like screenshots and trailers actually like communicating to people like what this game is and why it's cool? Is our Steam page engaging and clear? And I think also like doing some play testing to sort of figure out to like, and is it actually the game? And if so, are there things that you can change? But I think really like at that point, there's also some throwing spaghetti at the wall and just kind of seeing like, okay, well, what we're doing isn't working. It's not resonating. Like, what can we change? What can we tweak? Can we highlight something different about our game? Are we focused on the wrong thing? Like, I think asking some of those questions is really important. And then I think also just figuring out like what opportunities can you sort of leverage. That could be a good place to start a community if you don't have one, or to re-engage with people who previously supported your other games or things like that too.
Yeah, no, I mean this is all great stuff, and that makes perfect sense to me. Do you have any other advice of like, how do I put this? Common pitfalls?
Um, yes. Trying to remember. I think I even have a list. Hold on. um, yes, like just common marketing pitfalls in general, you mean?
Marketing, positioning, or like waiting too long to think about how to message something, to put a store page up, things like that.
Okay. Yes, off the top of my head, I think some common pitfalls that maybe some other people won't agree with actually. But I always say like a lot of times, especially new developers, say like try to compare their games to other games in their marketing. So they'll say it's as if like my game is if X and Y had a baby, or it's like the newest version of this game or whatever. And I think that is a big mistake and like a big no-no for a myriad of reasons, but a couple being that I think one, you're setting expectations potentially very high for players, especially players who loved those other games that you're referencing. Or if players don't know those other games, then you've just kind of lost them completely. Or if they don't like those games, then also you've probably lost them. So I think that like you should be able to speak about your game as if it's its own entity. And I think people get stuck there often. I think people do Steam Next Fest way too early. I think a lot of that has to do with predicting timelines wrong. So I would always say, like, if you're making a timeline, add at least like, I don't know, minimally 3 months, but often like 6 months to 9 months to the end of it and work off of that. So there's always delays. I mean, I always tell people I think I've had somewhere between 3 and 5 games launch on time since 2019. So it's like very rare that people launch on time. So I think like taking into account what is a realistic timeline is really important, and people feel way too confident in themselves in that way. I'm trying to think what else. I think showing too much in the first trailer that you do, and again, I think that comes down to timelines in a lot of cases. But let's say you've got a year of a public-facing marketing calendar. If you show basically like everything that your game has to offer in the very first announcement, then you've got to figure out like how to keep people engaged and what you can show for the next year. And that sucks. So I always like recommend that people like figure out how many trailers they want to make based on the type of game, the budget that they have, if they're going to do it internally or externally or all those kinds of things, and break down like specifically what are we going to show in each of these so that we can make sure that we've got enough like different unique things that makes each one exciting, and also that we can literally hold it for a year. That's another one that I see often. The other thing too is I also really try to push people to have a mailing list. So like I often encourage people to like collect emails in a demo or something like that, because people who sign up for your mailing list are most likely to convert, and just it's less of a mistake but more of like a missed opportunity. I feel like people rarely do that, and people rarely utilize mailing lists, and I think that they're great and really important. I think also, like, if you're interested in working with a platform that, again, you always hold the most power before you launch, or before you announce. So, like, trying to do that late only works if you've had like a previous really successful game, or your announcement's gotten a ton of momentum, right? Then we can look at like actual numbers and interest. And so I think that makes it a bit trickier. The other thing too that I find sometimes is when I ask people like who their competitors are, is I get the answer like, I don't have any. Like, my game's so unique, I just don't have any. And that's like not an answer. You always have competitors. And if you can't answer that, or you think the answer is I don't have any, then you need to revisit and look at that again. And then I also think like really refining your hook, really important. I think to your point being like the game is really good, that's just not going to work. I think you can also like test that out on people, not that specific line, but like a line that you would come up with, and kind of see. I think people don't actually get a lot of feedback from other people as much as they should. And along those lines too, I think playtesting. I think people wait way too long to start playtesting, and then in a lot of cases they're not able to actually enact feedback, and that impacts marketing too. I'm sure there's more, but those are just the ones that come to me off the top of my head.
And speaking of mailing lists, if somehow you are listening to this podcast and you aren't subscribed to the Draknek Friends mailing list, you can go to draknek.org, or you can go to thinkythirdthursday.com. Either of those, you can sign up to our mailing list. We will send you a monthly roundup of great puzzle game recommendations, and we'll tell you whenever we release a great game for you to play. Getting on the more practical side of what you just said, I feel like there's a lot of puzzle games where like the developers wouldn't really know how to do more than one trailer. Do you have any like tips for, like, is it a sign that if you can't figure out how you'd make two different feeling trailers, then your game is maybe going to be inherently problematic for marketing? Or is there some kind of switch you can flip in your brain to figure out how to do multiple trailers for something?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one, if you're making a puzzle game, then ideally you would go and look at like trailers for lots of other puzzle games to hopefully give you some ideas of like what did other people do and what worked. But I mean, you should be able to make more than one trailer for any game, even if it's only two, right? Even if it's just an announcement and a launch. There should be enough meat there, or enough things where it's like, okay, this one we're really focused on, I don't know, this really cool mechanic that we have in our game. And this one we're really focused on just like showing all the juice and everything on like an all-encompassing level. I don't know, like there should be enough there that you can get at least two out of it. Like if you really can't, then I think that's tricky. I mean, I also think like if you work externally with a trailer person, they're going to help you kind of figure out like, okay, you need two trailers. I think for the first one, we should do this, and this, we should do Y. But if you're doing it all internally, I think the best way to kind of figure that out is to watch other trailers, or, watch the Cerebral Puzzle Showcase that y'all do, and kind of see what other people are doing generally. But yeah, I think pretty much any game you can get more than one trailer out of, unless it's really shallow. And then in that case, you're just making a really small game.
Yeah, and even then, sometimes making a really small game, like with Electrifying Incident, we were thinking about multiple trailers Like, what does that even look like?
Do you have any career highlights, games you really, really enjoyed working on?
I really enjoyed working, like Dicey Dungeons was a really fun game to work on. And a game that I got to work on for a long time, which was cool. I think the game launched in 2019, and I think I started working with them in 2017, and then worked on all of the platform ports after that. But that was a really fun game to work on. Terry's brilliant, and the art was super cool. The music was great. People loved it. So it's always fun to work on a game that lots of people love. Working with you guys was really fun. I really enjoyed getting to work on like Lock Digital with y'all and Sokoban Express. And I mean, honestly, my favorite thing is just like, yes, I love working on really cool games, right? Like that's why we're here. But I also love just getting to work with teams that are like interesting and diverse, and perhaps like live in areas of the world that I've never gotten to go to. And I just feel like it's helped me kind of like grow a lot as a human. So in general, like that's probably just my favorite thing about my job. And I like working on like lots of different games with different challenges, different platforms, different timelines, all of that kind of stuff. Trying to think what else has been fun. Hold Down was really fun to work on. Isles of Sea and Sky was actually really fun to work on. Those guys are great. And that's an example of a puzzle game, I think, particularly that kind of reaches over the line and like holds people's hands to make them like less afraid or realize that they're not actually playing a puzzle game. I'm working currently with like the team making the Trinket Studios team making Battlesuit Aces, and that's been a lot of fun. So I don't know, really a lot of different things that have been fun and interesting kind of throughout the last decade, honestly.
Yeah, it's a great resume on top of everything else. Something you touched on there that I'd love to dig in a little bit more, because like when we worked with you, the first campaign that we had with you that wrapped up was the Patrick's Parabox console port.
Oh,
And
right, yeah.
so between that and you mentioned like the follow-up support on a game like Dicey Dungeons with additional platform releases, what are your thoughts slash differences slash like any advice or warnings based on post-release messaging and marketing for stuff like that? Specifically because like once a game has already reached like the public for its 1.0 launch, a lot of opinions and like somewhat consensus will have formed around the title.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you're right, right? Like if the game bombs at first, I mean, there are some stories that you hear about like the game was getting no attention and then all of a sudden it blew up. But that's not typical, right? So if your game bombed on Steam, then often it's not going to do great on other platforms. But there are exceptions to that rule, particularly if you're making a game with like a very Nintendo art style, or you've gotten platform support, or mobile is like a totally different beast altogether. But I think also some of it depends on like what's the timing between your initial announcement and your initial launch and your next like release. So if it's pretty immediately following, then I think that that marketing is going to be like much more streamlined, probably smaller. But like for example, I think when we were doing Patrick's Parabox, I'm trying to remember, when did the original come out or the first launch happen?
The first launch and the console launch were about a year apart.
Okay. So that's like long enough apart that I think at that point, your job is to kind of remind people that the game exists. And potentially you're reaching a totally new audience at that point too. So I mean, in an ideal world, trying to get platform support is always going to be like the most helpful thing that you can do, right? So like getting in a direct, or having like Sony put you in one of their events or whatever. That's always the most helpful, but obviously that's not just like everyone can just do that. But I think sometimes tweaking messaging is good. I think in an ideal world too, by the time you get to, and I think we had this conversation a bunch of times too about like, well, did you add anything different for the console release? Is there something new? And I think like if I could, imagine my perfect like scenario, then they'd be like, yeah, we added an entire new, I don't know, game mode, or there's a new soundtrack or something that's like totally
we're
new.
using platform specific features.
Right, exactly. Or we're using this specific thing that works great on this specific platform. That's always the ideal, but that doesn't always happen. I think the beauty of having something like that is that then that's sort of your marketing message and it makes your life way easier. I do think when you're launching on other platforms, that's something to keep in mind is like, is there something that you can say that's different or that will appeal to a new audience or an audience that loves this platform or something of that sort? If the answer is no, then I think it gets a little trickier, particularly if you don't have any platform support at all. And in that case, I think it's finding either like new ways to reach people. It's reminding people that the game exists. It's repackaging it up again, we're going to talk about creating different trailers that could be compelling. If you have like great reviews from the first game, that can be a nice kind of thing to throw out there, or cool like streams or something that you can point to be like, people loved this. That's always really helpful too.
Yeah, Patrick's Parabox, I forget if we were working with you when this happened. Like, that also had the very weird sequence of events where the game comes out on PC in, like, 1 year. About a full year later, it comes out on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5. And then maybe 3 months after that, after release with no new news, it's in a Japanese indie direct.
I think that did happen when we were working together.
And like, yeah, I think it did, because like all three of us and Patrick were just kind of looking at each other being like, I mean, we should take the opportunity, but why?
Yeah, totally. Things like that happen. It's really freaking weird. I don't
It's
even
like,
remember.
well, I'm not going to say no, obviously, like the exposure is very helpful there, but
and the answer is probably one specific person at Nintendo Japan played the game and really loved it and fought for it.
Yes, that appears to have been the vibe of, I don't know, someone on the events and marketing team at Nintendo's Japanese headquarters just really likes Patrick's Parabox and Thinky games. And I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, for sure. If you can find like an internal champion of your game, that's...
Yeah, especially if that person works at, the Japanese headquarters and also happens to speak English.
Yeah, that's funny. I forgot that happened. See, I forget all these things.
Yeah, what a weird circumstance, but a happy series of events for that game.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, not to go like doom and gloom, but I think we're going to see less games porting to consoles with kind of what's going on financially. That's just my prediction. Because I think consoles are giving less support, right? So
the money's drying up because where is their money coming from at this point?
So I think we're going to see that happening less, especially as like sim ships on initial launches.
Yeah. Like the current read on the console market is only Nintendo seems to be doing okay, and Nintendo doesn't need money to incentivize people to want to launch on Switch 2.
Yeah, I just think it's tricky. I think it's going to be really interesting to just kind of watch and see what happens.
Yeah. Here is, while I know a lot of this episode in particular is probably going to be of interest to a lot of smaller indie devs in the space. I would give this blanket advice that probably seems obvious to the three of us, but it is like really important, which is do not bank your budget on platform support until a contract is signed.
Yeah. I would
Do
say
not.
that's true for everything.
Yes, but like incredibly, incredibly important. Like, do not spend 3 years of your life assuming that Nintendo is going to see your game and love it and put you on the front page of the eShop.
Right.
That happens to, maybe 2% of games if we're being very generous with how many games come out on the eShop.
I think that is very generous.
Like 1 to 2% of games get, even for 24 hours, featured presence on a console.
Totally. I think the other thing, this is a bit of an aside, and also like y'all are a publisher, so grains of salt, obviously. But like, I think when you're signing a publisher deal, be very, very careful. I have definitely had people come to me after working with publishers and being unhappy. And the most common reason for that is because they signed, well, there's a myriad of reasons, but one reason is they signed a contract and it said that the publisher would provide marketing support. And they did not get any details or information about like what that actually entailed. And I think if you're banking on a publisher to be your main driver of marketing, it's really important to understand like specifically what does that mean? Are they putting out like
a
press release one time and they're listing you in a list of all the games that they're publishing? Are they like, people aren't doing as many in-person conventions, but like, are they going to take your game to an in-person convention? Are they going to actually make your trailers? And if so, do you actually have any editorial say in what those end up being? All of that's really important to consider, I think, too.
Yeah, no, for publisher contract negotiations, and again, I've been on the publisher side at this point about as often as I've been on the developer side. But the thing that I tell developers is you should identify the 1 to 2 things that are most important to you, especially if funding is not one of them, and
totally
make sure that it is explicitly detailed. Make sure that the obligation is detailed such that if a publisher, like, what happens if the publisher gets acquired and another company gets your contract? Are you still going to get what you need? Because the contract should guarantee that you are going to receive the things that are most important to you. That is what the contract is there for. It is there to help both parties make sure that whatever you're agreeing to in a Google Meet call before the contract actually happens.
For sure. And I think too, like, publishers can be great. I mean, they're really helpful for a myriad of reasons and a bunch of ways, and often have like expertise that you as the developer don't have. And I think that like a lot of people, like the narrative for many years was like, well, I need a publisher. And I would ask people, okay, like why? And they'd be like, I don't know, I just do. It's like, okay, but why? Like, I think knowing very specifically, like, what do you need out of it? And like, for example, if you just need localization, then maybe you don't need to do a full publisher deal. Like that's,
Yeah, agreed. A lot of the time when I've talked to developers, it's something to the effect of small loan.
Right, agree.
And it's like, how much is the loan? And they're like, I don't know, I would probably need 10 grand. I'm like, well, you could actually, like, I don't actually encourage this, especially if you're in the United States right now in 2025. I'm not actually encouraging this, but like in the past, it's been like, well, you could just go to the bank.
Yeah, although funny enough, I've gotten a couple emails recently of people being like, so I'm wondering, should I take out a loan? Or like, I had someone be like, should I take out a second mortgage on my house to work with you? And I was like, no, no, do not do that. Like, I'm too anxious for that. Like, never do that. Don't do that.
Yes. Spend within your means.
Yeah. Don't ever do that. It's not worth it. It's so stressful.
And also, even if you've got hundreds of thousands of wish lists, don't do that.
Yes. No, nothing is a guarantee.
All of the signs of like, oh no, but I've definitely got a hit on my hands. You might not. Don't pre-commit to anything.
Yes.
Totally. I'm curious actually from your perspective, because I've seen with a lot of my folks that like wish list conversions are down. Is that what you're seeing too?
So talking to a bunch of other developers and then also looking at our own, wishlist conversions in for games in general are down, and some
Yeah.
subgenres are more resilient than others.
Yeah.
I would
sure.
say that Draknek wishlist conversions are more resilient than many others.
That makes sense because you all are very like niche and specific.
If someone is wishlisting a Draknek game, there is a much higher intent to buy, especially because we put out enough games that like people continue to remember us.
Totally.
Versus here's a new game, or like here's a game from a studio that hasn't put something out in 5-6 years.
For sure. Or it's your first game. I mean, especially if it's your first game, I think wish lists are really important for a bunch of reasons, but like, I think it's really hard to make any sort of broad sweeping assumptions at this point about what conversions
and of course it's the people who don't have launch experience who are the most going to be in the weeds about like trying to do like division on wish lists to like basically try and divine how financially solvent they're going to be.
Right.
But like the problem is that I use the word divine for a reason. It's divination. You're not going to get an accurate result.
Right. I mean, I think, you could make, like, you want to do some basic spreadsheet math and be like, okay, worst case scenario, it's this. Best case scenario, it's this. Like, I think that's all really important, but like, I wouldn't be looking at, I have 100,000 wish lists. I'm the next Balatro or whatever.
Yeah, or like, I'm guaranteed 10,000 copies in my launch week.
Right.
Because it's like, no, that's a good scenario. That's a really good scenario. You need to run the numbers on 1%, 2%, 3%. Like you need to run these numbers and find your range of acceptability.
For sure.
And then you can also you could tailor a lot of your pre-launch run-up to like use on platform messaging, such as like news posts that are targeting people who have already wishlisted you to attempt to remind people that they have you on their wish list, so that it's not just I see a game, I wishlist it, a year and a half later I get an email.
Totally. I mean, if you want to be sophisticated, most people don't do this, but if you want to be sophisticated with something like a mailing list, for example, I think it would probably be advantageous to segment, right? So like, these are people who have never bought a game from us before. This is their first time ever even signing up for our mailing list. These are people who bought our other games, and like tailor messaging accordingly. That requires obviously a lot more like just manpower and energy and all of those types of things. But I think that would be great if that could happen.
If everyone had 10 people working full time to market their game, then, of course, everything would be a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, my job would be, I don't know, my job would either be way easier or way harder. I'm not sure.
You would have designated points of contact who are likely going to actually take steps on the things that they discussed between the last call and now.
Right.
Which is, it's an improvement. That would probably be an improvement for at least
totally.
How we worked with you. I don't know. I can't speak to anyone else.
Well, I think one thing that I do a lot in my job that I definitely didn't anticipate, but I feel like I'm sort of somewhere between like an accountability coach and like sometimes a therapist.
Being a producer.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of a funny story, but not really. I had a client actually, this was years ago, like break up with their partner and then call me to like talk to me about it. And I was like, you want to do this? Sure. But I think like, cause I really don't like to do this with people. So whatever, try not to do this, but I've had people be like, we're going to take a break for, the game's taking way longer. We don't have the budget. Can we please take a break for like 6 months and then come back and work with you. I promise we're going to do all of these things in these 6 months. And I'm like, okay, you sure? And they're like, yep, 100%. And then we resync up after 6 months. And I'm like, okay, so I didn't see Steam updates. I didn't see any of these things. And it's like, they did none of them. Like,
Of course.
unfortunately,
Because
I mean,
because they I don't know, the dog got off the leash for 6 months and didn't want to return to the leashed area.
right. So like, I definitely feel like part of my job is literally just making sure like, okay, well, we have this event coming up. You said you were going to put new screenshots up. Did you capture the new screenshots? It's like, that's literally part
not.
of it. Yeah.
Of course not. Gosh, I mean, we could have a whole. I just realized that we've been talking for over 50 minutes and have not once mentioned the Sokobond Express art style change.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that are done in the name of marketing and positioning, but
I'm curious, do you guys feel like that was worth it?
It was not worth it.
Okay.
I think it didn't take that long to make the change, and I think it made the game marginally more exciting to look at by a factor that would have paid off the small development time that was spent on it.
Yeah.
We're talking about a disproportionate amount of discussion and producer stress versus like the actual implementation effort.
You were stressed, Syrenne?
What? Yeah, of course I was stressed, Dana.
I know. I seem to remember actually you being like, no, we're not changing the art style. And Alan and I were like...
You seem to remember correctly.
Right. And Alan and I were like, no, I think we should really change it. And you were like, we cannot change it. And then at the end of the meeting, it was like, nope, we're changing it.
Oh, weird. This is how it always goes.
Yeah. If it makes you feel better, people often don't listen to me either.
Definitely the ideal situation would have been to have had that conversation right at the start of development.
Yes.
For sure.
Not 7 months before ship or so. Like,
yeah, I'll back you on that one.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I agree.
That was the part that actually like was distressful. And a lot of the, sometimes I'll get on a podcast and I'll play like I'm a little more aggrieved than I actually am. See also the electrifying incident postmortem, which is just an hour of me yelling at Alan. It's a very funny episode. But the actuality is I'm usually okay with pivots. I just become increasingly less open to pivots as the development progresses.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
The later you get, the harsher I'm going to react, because it's like, we have a plan. Everyone agreed to the plan. Why are we suddenly saying, screw the plan? We're going to change everything. We're going to change this. We're going to change that. And so sometimes, I try and put my foot down. And usually when I put my foot down, those are the times that don't actually happen. Or I don't get my way. Usually it's when I throw something out casually that like it'll actually be received better. And
that's so funny.
That's just a weird environment, but that's neither here nor there.
I think you just the times when we disagree stick with you more than the times. Like, there definitely are times where you'll just go firmly, like, no, we're not doing this. I'm like, no, you're right. But, like, that's less memorable than the times when...
No, that has happened a few times, but usually it's because you're cackling as you propose it because you expect me to shoot it down. This is you in contract negotiation asking for too much so that I can feel like I get a win. That's what those are.
Well, once I'm there, like at the end sort of our working together, weren't you like, okay, so we're going to launch Sokobond Express on new platforms. We're going to announce Lock Digital. We're going to do Cerebral, and we're going to, we were like, huh?
Yeah, that is, that's our cadence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dana, here's the last 6 months. We launched Lock Digital on PC in December. at the same time we announced it for mobile. We released on mobile in January. We and we launched in an event. We launched in Day of the Devs, and
Right, right,
then
right.
we were on mobile in January. Then a couple weeks later, we announced Electrifying Incident, had a demo for Electrifying Incident, ran the entire marketing campaign, launched Electrifying Incident. Then I'll speak future tense because of the time of recording, but everyone will know by this point. Then a week from today, we're announcing Spooky Express. Then a couple weeks later, we're going to have a demo for Spooky Express. And then a couple weeks later, we're going to run Cerebral Puzzle Showcase.
Well, if you could see me, you would see my lack of surprise face.
Yes. No, this is the last 6 months. Also, we hired someone during this six-month period.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, sure
I mean,
is,
it's
isn't
cool, but it's a lot.
This is what we do. We keep busy. Isn't that right, Alan?
The treadmill never turns off.
I was going to say, we're also actually for real this time shipping the last parts of the Bonfire Peaks DLC, which is something you heard us talk about when we were working with you.
Okay.
Actually for real, as in certified on consoles already.
Oh, okay, nice.
It will probably be out at the time of this recording goes live.
Yeah, God, I hope so. That'll be embarrassing if not.
I hope so for you too.
Yeah, that's goodness. We are doing so much. As we wrap up, Dana, do you have any last thoughts or questions for us?
One thought, I guess it's been like percolating in my mind, but it's just happened often. If you're going to hire a marketing person, you should sometimes listen to them.
Sometimes. Good to know.
How do you know when you should?
I mean, listen, like I am also a control freak, so like I totally understand hiring someone for something and then being like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But I also think like if you're not open to listening at all, then just don't hire someone. Like I've had instances of people where it's like I'm just there and I'm giving them what I would do and they don't listen at all. And like
yes.
And it's weird. It's
weird. Stressful, and I've had that as a producer too. And again, I want to be clear, not with Draknek. Even though, again, I publicize the parts where I'm not listened to. Broadly, I'm listened to at Draknek. But I've had that with other clients, and at best I could say, well, I'm collecting a paycheck to speak into a void.
Right. Like, obviously, it's a collaborative effort, right? Like, I don't expect anyone to listen to me all the time, nor do I think you should. Like, it's your game, it's your baby, you have more stake in it, obviously, than I do. But, like, I would say, like, only hire a marketing person if you're actually, like, interested in utilizing them, which is a weird thing to say, but like just something on the peripheral of my brain. I guess a question for you guys would be like, now I'm curious, like since we work together, is there anything that you all like approach differently or things that you've changed as a result? It's okay if you say no.
I think we are pushing the mailing list a lot more than when we were working together.
We're pushing the mailing list a lot more, and also, I mean, there's definitely a significant part, and you'll be proud of this, of conversations early on in development where I will literally say something to the effect of, "What would Dana think about that?"
I love that.
And be like, "How are we positioning this game?" Like very early, like that has actually stuck with us internally.
Oh, I love that. That makes me so happy. Yeah, I always tell people like pretend that you're like a toddler, right? And just keep asking why when you're talking about it. So I love that. I love that you hear my annoying voice in your head.
Your voice is not annoying, but sometimes you are being constructively annoying using your voice.
Have you all made any changes to how you do anything as sort of a result of like where the games industry is currently?
Smaller games,
Okay,
faster development cycles. That's
that makes
partially Alan
sense.
burnout, and that's partially just like looking at the world.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, whenever I talk to someone and they tell me like, yeah, I've been working on this game for 5 years, 6 years, I'm always like, oh no. like
Ship it.
that's bad. I mean, also like I think at that point you're probably either way overscoped or like you're just never going to be happy with it. Like there's always
Yeah.
things that you can do better. Um, yeah, I think that's interesting too. Like I think smaller games is definitely something people should consider.
Were you gonna say anything, Alan?
No, and that would have been pretty much my answer. Like, I mean, it's generally, yeah, developing games in such a way that we assume that they will not be extremely successful. Like we've had a hit with Monster Expedition. We are making games going forwards, assuming that we will never have a game as successful as that again.
Yep.
Yeah. My other question too is like, so you all run Cerebral, but
Yep.
also obviously you're doing your own games. Like, I feel like there's really a challenge these days. Like before all of these online festivals existed, it was in some ways easier is the wrong word, but like I don't know another word to use. Like it was easier for people to sort of like announce things on their own. So like how do you guys balance, like you were saying Lock Digital was in Day of the Devs, but like that's not
Yeah.
common or that's
No.
difficult, right? Like you can't just rely on that. So like how do you guys balance when you're doing an announcement for a game, like trying to be part of an event and then if that doesn't work, like doing it on your own?
Yeah. I mean, we apply to everything,
Yeah.
as
They want
is
people to do, yeah.
as is kind of common wisdom. We a lot of the time we are not selected, and we totally get that, especially as people that run a festival. Like, of course, you're gonna not every game can be in everything, but when we have a game that is coming up, even if we don't know what the announcement plan is, we'll usually mention it and frame something as like announcement opportunity or like whatever, and see if that gets anyone interested. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Day of the Devs for Luck Digital, it's funny, we didn't actually when we didn't pitch them on launching into it. The timing just lined up. So we asked them afterwards, hey, you good if we have a out now call to action at the end of it? And they're like, yeah, works great for us.
Oh, that's awesome.
But like they were willing to have us in whether or not we were launching. And that was very, again, deeply fortunate, not taking that for granted.
Yeah, for sure.
And then yeah, also one of these days we'll have a episode coming out about Day of the Devs, so you can stay tuned for that, I think.
Oh, cool.
But I don't know, Alan, like I feel like we keep a lot of options open until such a time where we're coming up on the calendar where we actually want the game to be announced by, and then we start kind of working back from there.
Yeah, I think actually, like, there's an interesting thing we did, like, gosh, was it 3 or 4 years ago now? Which is an example of doing this badly, where we had so much stuff built out that we hadn't announced. So we're like, well, I guess we need to like do a Draknek direct where we announce all of this at once because we,
God.
and that to be clear was a bad plan. We should
Yes,
have just been announcing things as we went.
That was a plan that stemmed from we are working on so many things.
Oh my gosh.
And we have not made the time to tell people about any of them.
That's actually, I feel like one of you made also a good point in there. Like what a marketing tip that I often tell people to do, and like what I typically do for my folks when we're making like a marketing timeline is like I make a timeline A, assuming that you get into whatever, cerebral, wholesome, whatever. And then I make a timeline B that's like, and what if we don't? So that at least you're not like left floundering. I feel like a lot of people put all their eggs in like the showcase basket, but they're really competitive.
They are like for us. The way that I think about it is, I'm like, what is the date that we are for sure going to be announced by? Like by this point, people will know about the game, and then work backwards. Like, all right, apply to every showcase before then with announcement. And if we are getting close, if we're getting like within, I don't know, 8 weeks of that point, we haven't heard back from anyone, or like everyone's rejected us, obviously we're gonna make our own announcement on our own terms, and we're gonna figure that out. But like the hope is that you can leverage someone else's platform for the announce, and then you also have to completely and totally plan on not doing so.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I know you have to wrap, and this has been going on for a while. This is just like when we were working with you. I feel like I could talk to you for hours at a time because there's so much insight.
Oh, well, thanks, friends. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Where can people find you online, and is there anything you want to plug other than your agency?
People can find me at my website, spokenwheelstrategy.com. Not spoke and I'll try to speak clearer. And then I'm on Blue Sky, but I never know what my name is. You can find me on Blue Sky, just D Trebella. That is my name.
Yeah. If you follow Draknek on Blue Sky, we'll tag you in the post when this episode goes live.
Oh, awesome. Great.
So people can find you there.
And that has my email too, which is just Dana at Spoken Wheel Strategy if anybody wants to reach out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Again, this has been a lovely chat, and I know that this will help some people, and I'm hoping that it will spark internal ideas among a bunch of different developers about what they can be doing to improve their own marketing and positioning situations.
Awesome. I hope so.
Yeah. All right. And thank you for listening to the Draknek and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.